Good morning, y'all. It's Joe. We're back under the shade tree again, and today I'm doing a few upgrades on Ethel. First of all, I've got a Newport wiper system to replace the old 12-volt vacuum motor. Well, let me back that up. It's a 12-volt motor, but it has a vacuum-controlled switch. So it's kind of a pain in the butt, but we'll get it done. Okay, I'm going to tell you all right now, I'd already cheated and pulled out the old wiper motor. This assembly is a pain in the butt. It's old, it's antique, it's heavy. There's the vacuum switch that controls it, but it is a 12-volt motor. If you've ever worked on any of this old stuff from the 50s, you know what I'm going to tell you about next. Clutch head screws. If you've never had to deal with one of these, they're a pain in the butt if you don't have the clutch head screwdriver. Fortunately, what I've got is this DeWalt kit right here. I can't even begin to tell you what the part number is on it, but it's got all sorts of attachments, including clutch heads, one small, one large. And that's what you need up underneath the dashboard to get this thing out. They are a pain in the butt. If you ever have to go ahead and deal with them, replace them as soon as you can. Okay, this is what's going in, is the Newport Engineering 12-volt unit. You have the option of a regular 2-speed switch, or you can get one with delay. I'm going to go ahead and hook this up through the multi-function switch on the steering column, so hopefully delay will work and I won't have to go ahead and buy another switch. The standard 2-speed switch is what came with it, but like I said, I want to try and run this through the multi-function switch on the steering column right there, so I don't have to add extra switches, and it'll be a matter of convenience since I've got all the modern stuff going on. Anyway, I'm fixing to go ahead and shove this up underneath the dashboard, and we'll be going, hopefully getting this put back together shortly. Okay, now we're looking straight up at the bottom of the dashboard. I've already got one bolt started into the mounting bracket, and then I can go ahead and get the other one up there once I get the motor hung. And then there is, let's see, looking back down, there's that mount right there. That's the bottom side of it, and that's what supports the wiper motor. Ignore all the wiring mess underneath the dash. I'm still sorting things out as what I can get rid of. But that's where this motor's gonna get hung here in just a moment. Again, we're looking up at the bottom side of the dash. All right, I'll tell you right now that if you've never had to do this sort of thing before, you might consider yourself kind of like a whore in Vegas. You're gonna be spending a lot of time on your back and sweating to get up underneath this dashboard and get it put in. But you know, it's worth it in the long run. I'll be more than happy to show you what we got going on here in just a sec. Okay, the tricky part is this bracket right here, this little L-shaped thing. It's the rear support bracket for the wiper motor, and it goes to the factory position on the dashboard for the lower mount. The instructions in Newport say very clearly that you do not need to modify any of the brackets. If you think you have to modify the brackets to make it fit, you're doing something wrong. So stop, figure it out, and then proceed once you got it in the right location. Okay, everything goes in loose until it's all set up, and then you tighten the hardware down. Okay, now here's one thing that's mildly annoying, but I'll deal with it. The instructions from Newport don't specify a whole lot about the hardware other than that back bracket that I was showing you. And they start talking about using one of these bolts to go ahead and secure it in the factory location, which I'm fine with. The issue that I do have is that we've got some washers, we've got some nylon washers, and then we've got these nylon bushings and the clips. Okay, the nylon bushings and the clips, I'm certain, are for the transmission arms where they meet the wiper motor. But there's no mention of these nylon washers at all, and I'm willing to bet that they go between the wiper motor and the cab to keep things from squeaking around. These washers, I'm sure, are additional support for the hardware, these 3 bolts that go ahead and mount the wiper motor to the cab. And said the lock washers, apparently they threw an extra one in, same with the E-clips. But either way, I'm not too concerned about that, but just pay attention, figure things out. Said I'm sure these washers serve a purpose, and I'm willing to bet that they go ahead and isolate the motor from the cab a little bit to keep it from squeaking under your dashboard. So take the extra step, put it in between the mounting bracket and the dashboard, and save yourself some headache. Alrighty, here I am laying on my back looking up at the bottom side of the dashboard. These guys here are my transmission controls. I'll talk about that here later. Okay, when I was talking about the wiper arm bushings, that's these guys. Okay, there's a brass core, and it looks like maybe a steel support or brass support, I don't know. And some rubber that goes between that and the arm itself, or the transmission arm itself. And all that gets popped out and replaced with those nice nylon bushings that came from Newport. So I'm fixing to go ahead and knock these out and we'll put those in. Well, I'm sure in the 1950s at the dealership there was probably a fancy little tool, kind of like a chain breaker, to go ahead and push this bushing out and replace it if you ever got to that point, or that the rubber just finally wore out and it started squeaking. Well, I've got my answer to that, and that's a fancy little tool too. It's called DeWalt. Oh yeah, baby, you're coming out. Oh look, scuffed a few times with a death wheel and all of a sudden that bushing pops right out. Go figure. And here we have the new nylon bushing in place. All I do is put the arm back on the transmission arm back on the wiper motor, and put one of those E-clips in place. Easy peasy. Okay, so here we are back looking under the dashboard. You can see I've got both transmission arms in place, the nylon bushings are in place, the E-clips are in place, everything's holding like it should be. And we got another little bit of a project going on before we can go ahead and finish buttoning this up. So let me show you what else was up. Okay, so back in the 50s when GM was making these trucks, there was a louvered panel up here at the base of the windshield that would go ahead and draw, one more time in English, would draw in fresh air and would go ahead and come down through this cowl panel here and then back into the cab. And you had pull cables that would open up these vent doors here. So you go ahead and get fresh air into the cab. There was not factory air conditioning in these. And so that was it. You had that pull cable that would go ahead and open this door and it'd bring that fresh air in from the base of the windshield. The problem with all that is that it would also go ahead and collect dirt and debris, leaves, twigs, and stuff like that. And all runs back down in here into the back side. See if I can show you this. Okay, into the back side of this fender, and down here at the bottom where my hand is, they all start to rot out because there wasn't much in the way of primer. They didn't really do a whole lot of metal protection inside the cab for this stuff. And so what happens is, over time, the bottom side of these fenders, I'm sorry, one more time, there we go. The bottom side of these fenders right here rust out. They all start right in here, okay? And so what I did is I went ahead and replaced that louvered panel with a blank, okay? Somebody actually back in, probably the mid-90s, early 2000s, went ahead and started selling blank panels without the louvers in. Now granted, that meant you didn't get fresh air in through those vents at the kick panel. However, you also didn't have so much debris getting down inside there to go ahead and collect moisture and lead to rust. Okay, and here's my blank panel. Okay, I went ahead and had it up on the truck for a long time with the factory primer that was on it. It was just starting to go ahead and show a little bit of surface rust, so I went ahead and cleaned it up, put a fresh coat of Eastwood primer on it. Really, you had to go ahead and land there, you silly bug. Cresser on a cracker. Okay, so that paint on the cowl panel there has to go ahead and dry, so I can go ahead and finish putting these arms through. And then there's a little chrome bezel that goes on that. Well, there's a gasket, a chrome bezel, and then a retaining nut, and it's also got the setup for the windshield squirter on it. So let me show you that. Okay, so this guy here pokes through your firewall, or through the cowl panel, behind your firewall and under your dashboard, and this brass tube right here is where your washer would hook up to, and then there's a squirter nozzle that screws into that. Okay, and these are directional. There's one per side, and like I said, you've got to have that cowl panel on first, then this slides on, then there's a nut that retains, there's a gasket under this, and then there's a nut that retains this to the cowl panel. And so all that has to go together. If it's not put together like it's supposed to be, it's not going to go ahead and work. And with that cowl panel being the way it was kind of a pain in the butt because there was just a slight bow in it and I could get one side on but not the other. That's why there's that big 1/2-inch bolt that you would see in the videos on the driver's side. But I've rectified that, did a little bit of metal shaping, and hopefully this will all go back together like it's supposed to. Otherwise, if I stripped that transmission linkage on the driver's side, then I got to start over and order a whole new transmission linkage, which is about 120 bucks to replace the entire assembly. I really don't want to do that just because I went ahead and had a little bit of thread damage. So just go ahead and be patient. All right, the other thing to keep in mind is all this Walt Disney spaghetti under here has got to stay out of the way of this transmission linkage right here, because this thing's going to be sawing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth when the wiper's running. And with that, I've got that nylon oil pressure line for the mechanical oil pressure gauge, plus all the dashboard wiring, and I need to make sure that all that stays clear. If I have to, I'll go ahead and build myself a metal shield, bolt it through this aluminum bracket right here, and then up in front of that transmission linkage just to make sure that I don't have any stray wires rubbing up against that would go ahead and potentially ground out and then cause a fire. And we all know what happens when vehicles catch fire, especially on electrical. So anyway, I'm going to prevent that one way or another. Okay, on a side note, the other day I did a little project. I didn't video the project. I was kind of hustling to get things done, and anybody that's ever gone ahead and tried to run video on a project while you're trying to go ahead and get the work done knows that it takes 2, 3, 4 times as long to get the work done because you're stopping what you're doing to go ahead and shoot video and explain what you're doing. That being said, these 2 toggle switches right here control my transmission. Okay, Ethel has a 46RH, also known as an A518. It's a Chrysler transmission. Basically, it's a 727 with an overdrive assembly on it. This particular one, the 46RH, has overdrive and has a lockup torque converter. Right now, because I am running the 46RH and the computer and everything else is looking for a 46RE, the torque converter and overdrive were not operational. There is a kit through a company called PATC. I'll show you that here in just a second. Okay, that PATC kit for 88 bucks, what that does is it will eliminate these 2 switches. It has some oil pressure switches and a vacuum switch that go ahead and make everything function automatically. In my case, what I'm doing right now is I'm saving myself 88 bucks, and I have the 2 toggle switches. There's a 3-wire plug that comes from the transmission because I still had the old wire harness from the 1994 donor truck. I was able to go ahead and harvest that pigtail and put it into this transmission and then connect these wires for these switches. And so what happens is the center wire is keyed 12 volt ignition or 12 volt positive, and these 2 switches are ground. And so the center wire on the plug is 12 volt. The front wire on the plug, the one closest to the front of the truck, is the ground wire for the overdrive, which is this switch right here. And then the wire, I can't talk. The wire closest to the back of the truck is the torque converter lockup, which is this wire or this switch right here. And so right now, while I'm rolling down the road, once I go ahead and get up to highway speed, I'm cruising along, I flip switch number 1, and switch number 1 goes ahead and completes the circuit, grounds, and the transmission goes ahead and shifts into overdrive. Once it shifts into overdrive, I'll go ahead and I'll throw switch number 2, and switch number 2 goes ahead and locks up the torque converter. Now, the drawback to this is that every time the transmission has to go through the gears, I have to throw these switches, which also means every time I come to a stop, I have to turn both these switches off. Not practical for driving around town, but being as how I live out in the country, more often than not, I'm cruising on the highway, and so I just go ahead and lock up 4th gear, lock up the torque converter, and we're good to go. And it's really pretty handy. So far, it looks like it's about a 5 mile per gallon improvement. Just based on what I've run so far, I've only got the partial tank through, but it really seems to have made a difference. And I'll show you underneath the truck here in just a second what I ended up doing. Okay, this plug right here with the 3 wires on it is above the shift linkage, above the transmission hard line, kind of almost directly above the neutral safety switch on this particular unit. And so, like I said, the wire in the center is the 12 volt positive off a keyed ignition source. I've got that run through a 10 amp fuse. And then the front wire goes ahead and engages overdrive. And the back wire goes ahead and engages the torque converter lockup. And it's pretty simple. I went ahead and made a harness right there and ran that up into the cab and into my fuse panel. Okay, so like I said, with that set up, I can go ahead and run the 46RH or the A518 with overdrive and lockup. I've been driving it for a year without it, so it just went first, second, third, and cruised down the highway, which is fine. The problem was that I was getting depending on the day, 11 or 12 miles to the gallon. Right now, I went ahead and showed up at just under 16. And that was with a partial tank already used on the, or without overdrive. So, it's coming in handy. It's, like I said, it's a little bit of work involved in it, but if you've got an older Chrysler product, you want to run a, heck, if you got a Duster or something like that had a 318, 340, 360, and you want overdrive without going ahead and buying a gear vendor unit, you can go ahead and pull out your 727 or your A904 and swap in an A518 or 46RH, and this will go ahead and get you overdrive. And like I said, PATC offers a kit that's 2 pressure switches and a vacuum switch, and that takes care of everything, makes it all automatic, so you don't have to worry about any kind of switches on your dashboard at all. So anyway, I'll go ahead, I'll put the link to that in the video, and now we're just waiting for paint to dry so I can finish putting the wiper transmission back together. So we'll see in a bit. Okay, so there we have it. I went ahead and bent a piece of sheet metal and bolted it to the pedal hanger bracket. So this way, the wiper transmission arm can move back and forth right here, and this right here will keep the wires and everything else from brushing up against that and chafing through and grounding out. So there's how that's going to work out. For right now, again, my original plan was to go ahead and use the multi-function switch on the steering column to go ahead and control the wipers. However, the wiring on the wiper motor doesn't support a intermittent mode, at least not that I'm aware of. So I went with the factory switch, or at least the switch provided by Newport, which is off, low, high. And we'll go with that for right now. I went ahead and sent them an email, so hopefully we'll get this sorted out. We'll figure out what's going on with that. And as far as the wire hanging off the rearview mirror goes, that's my speaker system. That's my Bluetooth for going down the road. It's Velcroed to my visor. It stays put, and if I want to go ahead and take it off, I can. But this way it charges while I'm going down the road, so there's that. Yeah, rolling down the road with the windows down, wind noise drowns out most of it, but yeah, it's better than nothing. So a little something to go ahead and listen to when I'm sitting around or rolling through town. Anyway, that's that for now. We'll see about getting everything put back together here shortly. All right, folks, well, here we have it. I've got a wiper motor now that actually will sweep the windshield. Key on. Knobby. Oh, look, it turns. Let's check this crap out. And it parks. And it turns. And it parks. So there's that. Like I said, I don't have it hooked up to the intermittent switch. I gotta go ahead and figure out how to do that function through the multi-function switch, and then I can go ahead and lose this switch in the dashboard, this sucker right here. But for right now, it works. It does. It will go ahead and work low and high. So the only thing I don't have is intermittent, which means I got to reach over and flip the switch every time I want to clear the windshield, just like I flip the switch to shift in overdrive and flip the switch to go ahead and lock up the torque converter. So, you know, there's a lot of switch flipping, but, you know, it's better than nothing at all, which is what I've been driving around with for the last year now. Good days only, and pray for heck that it doesn't rain. So, anyway. Alrighty, folks. Well, that's it. That's it for me under the shade tree. I got sweat running down in my eyes. It started out to be a nice day, and I mean, for August, it's really not horrible. I think it's still in the 80s. There's just not much of a breeze today, but it is what it is. So like I said, I've got functioning wipers now. I've got functioning overdrive, functioning torque converter lockup. I even have functioning taillights, trailer light wiring, because while I was waiting for this panel out front here to dry, waiting for the primer to seal up on it, I went ahead and I finished up my trailer plug wiring. So that's everything for me today. Now, like, share, subscribe. Check out some of the other channels, Robert's Garage, Old Car Guy, Roy Marco's Garage, Straight Six Fan, Katarina's Garage, Two Guys with Wrenches, or Dudes with Wrenches, something like that. There's a bunch of channels out there. Find the ones you like, go ahead and share them with your friends. Support these guys. A lot of them are doing it for profit, some of them aren't, myself included. I don't do this for profit, I do this just for the heck of it. Because, you know, there's times where you might have a question on how to do something, and I might have an answer. So, anyway, y'all have a wonderful day. I'm going to go inside, cool off, and get away from the flies because they're driving me nuts. Y'all all be good, be safe, and be good to each other. We'll see you next time. This is Joe.